The mission was supposed to be simple. Sergeant Jason Cross, a seasoned soldier of the Galactic Coalition, had done his fair share of dangerous missions. But this one seemed different. This one should have been a cakewalk. A small, alien artifact. Nothing more, nothing less. He was told it would be a quick in-and-out job, a reward for his service, a chance to rest for a while. Maybe even a little vacation on a tropical colony afterward. Jason wasn't asking for much. Just a break. Jason's unit was an elite task force, the best of the best. They were used to working in harsh conditions, battling hostile forces across the galaxy, keeping peace in areas no one else could. It wasn't glamorous, but it was necessary work. They were the ones who went into the mess, handled the dirty jobs, and walked away with their hands clean. The pay was good, and there were always promotions for those who performed well. But this mission was different. There was no war, no heavy combat, just a simple extraction. A small, unassuming alien artifact, hidden on a remote moon orbiting a barren planet. Nothing more than a piece of history to some, but to the Coalition, it was valuable. They weren't sure why, but Jason didn't care. He'd been told to retrieve it, and that's exactly what he was going to do. He sat in the cockpit of the Sparrowhawk, a sleek military vessel, watching the barren planet grow larger on the viewscreen. The icy moon orbiting it was the target. There was a tiny research station up there, barely staffed, and the artifact was said to be hidden within its walls. It had all the makings of a routine mission, except Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "All systems green, Sergeant," came the voice of Lieutenant Riley, his co-pilot. Riley was young, sharp, and enthusiastic, an officer who had yet to see the horrors of war. Jason respected her, but he could sense the excitement in her voice.
She was eager for this mission. Too eager.
Jason didn't share her enthusiasm. He was used to the excitement of the battlefield, the rush of battle, the chaos of combat. But this was different. He had a gut feeling that the universe wasn't going to make it this easy. "All right, Riley. We'll make this quick," Jason said, his voice steady, trying to sound reassuring, though his gut twisted with uncertainty. "Prepare for descent." The Sparrowhawk shook slightly as it descended through the thin atmosphere of the moon, a cold, inhospitable place. They passed through clouds of dust, and soon the pale surface of the moon came into view. A barren landscape, frozen and lifeless. The research station sat in the distance, half buried under a layer of snow and ice. It was hardly more than a metal structure, a few windows glowing faintly from within. Jason's instincts told him to be cautious, but he pushed those thoughts aside. They were professionals. They'd completed countless missions just like this. Nothing to worry about. The ship touched down on the barren ground with a soft thud. Jason and his team, armed and prepared, disembarked quickly. The cold bit at their exposed skin, but it wasn't enough to distract them from the task at hand. They moved in silence toward the research station, their boots crunching the snow beneath them. The station's doors slid open as they approached, responding to their presence. Inside, the lights flickered dimly, casting long shadows across the sterile, metallic interior. It smelled of chemicals and old machinery, nothing unusual. They found the artifact in the main storage room, just as the intel had described. A small, nondescript box, its surface etched with symbols that no one could yet decipher. It wasn't much to look at, but Jason knew better than to underestimate something like this. It could hold valuable secrets. Information the Coalition might use to their advantage. He wasn't about to leave without it. "Got it," Jason said, securing the box inside his pack.
"Now, let's get out of here," Riley replied, glancing around nervously. But before they could make their way back to the ship, there was a sudden noise, a soft thud, followed by a series of whispers over the comms.
Jason froze. Something wasn't right. "Did anyone else hear that?" he asked. There was silence on the other end, and then Riley's voice crackled through the comms again, sounding more urgent now. "Sergeant, there's someone else here." Jason's hand instinctively went to the sidearm on his belt. "Check the perimeter." "Stay sharp," he ordered, his voice calm but carrying the weight of command. As the rest of his team fanned out, Jason's eyes scanned the room. It didn't take long to find the source of the disturbance. A figure lay in the corner, hidden behind a stack of crates. At first, Jason thought it was just another unconscious scientist, maybe an injured researcher left behind. But as he approached, he could see the figure clearly. It wasn't a human. The alien princess lay unconscious, her body draped in rich, violet robes. Her features were delicate, almost ethereal. Slender arms, an elegant face framed by dark hair, and a soft glow around her skin that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly light. She was tall, taller than most humans, with skin that seemed to shift with the light, her eyes closed and her body motionless. For a moment, Jason thought he was seeing things. An alien princess? Here, it didn't make sense. What was she doing in a research station on a frozen moon? Was she some sort of test subject? Lieutenant, Jason called, his voice tight with confusion. Get over here. What the hell is this? Riley approached cautiously, her eyes widening when she saw the alien lying there. She had no answer, only a stunned silence. Jason knelt beside the figure. The princess was alive. He could feel the warmth of her body and a pulse beneath her skin. But why was she here, and what was her connection to the artifact they had come to retrieve? She's not a researcher. Who the hell is she? Jason muttered, a frown creasing his brow.
I don't know, Sergeant, but I think we need to take her with us, Riley suggested, her tone betraying her uncertainty. Maybe we can get some answers. Jason hesitated. This wasn't part of the plan.
They had come for an artifact, not an alien princess. But something inside him told him that there was more to this than met the eye. He could sense it. This was no ordinary mission. The princess wasn't just an innocent bystander. She had to be important. All right, he said after a moment, standing up. We're taking her back. As they moved the princess toward the ship, Jason's mind raced. He had no idea what he had just uncovered, but one thing was certain. This mission was no longer simple. What should have been a routine extraction had just turned into something much more complicated and much more dangerous. The cold winds howled as they reached the ship, and Jason couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Someone, or something, was watching them. But there was no time to investigate. The team quickly loaded the princess onto the Sparrowhawk, and with a final look at the desolate moon, they took off. As they ascended into the cold vacuum of space, Jason glanced at the unconscious princess one last time. His reward had just turned into something much more complicated, and he had no idea what it meant for the future. But as the Sparrowhawk sailed into the stars, he knew one thing for sure. They were about to find out. The Sparrowhawk drifted through space, the hum of its engines a constant background as Sergeant Jason Cross stood silently in the cockpit. The mission had taken an unexpected turn. He'd come here for an artifact, something small, something insignificant. Instead, he was now carrying an alien princess, someone who appeared as though she had stepped out of an ancient story. Her presence aboard the ship was a mystery, and that alone made Jason uneasy. What had he gotten himself into? The princess was lying unconscious in the medical bay, her features serene, almost peaceful in her sleep. Jason could feel the tension in the air as he stared at her through the glass door. It had been a strange decision bringing her back. The higher-ups in the coalition hadn't mentioned anything about alien royalty being part of the mission, and the fact that they hadn't been informed of her presence left Jason feeling uneasy. "What do you think she is?" Riley's voice broke the silence in the cockpit. Jason turned to see her standing in the doorway, arms folded, eyes locked on the princess's unconscious form. Riley was sharp, a fast thinker, but her excitement had been replaced with caution. It had only been a few hours since their discovery, yet the situation was already feeling dangerous. "I'm not sure," Jason admitted, "but she's no ordinary alien. Her presence here doesn't make sense." "I don't think this is a coincidence." Riley nodded, glancing at the controls, her fingers tapping gently on the console. "You think someone's after her?" Jason's gut twisted as he thought about the possibility. The Zelnari Empire had a reputation. They were an enigmatic, dangerous race. And if this princess was one of their own, there could be any number of factions looking for her. That meant his simple mission had just turned into something far more complicated. "Definitely," he said. We've got to be careful. Whatever's going on here, we're in the middle of it." Riley's eyes narrowed.
"You think we're being watched?" "I don't know," Jason muttered.
"But I've got a feeling." For a few minutes, there was only the quiet hum of the ship and the occasional beep from the control systems. Jason could feel the unease in the pit of his stomach. Something was coming. He just didn't know what. As the hours passed, Jason and Riley took turns monitoring the princess's condition. They were in the middle of deep space, too far from any help, and even farther from any coalition forces that could provide answers. Jason's mind raced as he thought about all the things that could go wrong. But even with all the danger swirling around them, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of responsibility. This alien princess, who had been thrust into his care, wasn't just some helpless being. There was power in her, something he couldn't quite explain. She awoke hours later, her eyes fluttering open slowly. For a moment, Jason thought she might be disoriented, confused. But then she looked directly at him, with a steady gaze that made him stop in his tracks. There was something unsettling about it. Her eyes weren't like anything he'd ever seen. They were a deep shade of purple, shining with intelligence far beyond what any human could possess. It wasn't just the color that was strange. It was the depth, the weight they carried. "Where am I?" Her voice was soft yet strong, and Jason could hear the authority in her tone. He hesitated before answering. "You're on our ship. You were unconscious when we found you." The princess's gaze shifted, taking in the sterile, metallic room around her. Her eyes narrowed slightly, almost imperceptibly, as she assessed her surroundings. She didn't seem scared, nor did she seem confused. It was as if she had been in this situation before. "I'm not your prisoner, soldier," she said, her tone firm but calm. "Release me at once." His hand instinctively went to his sidearm, his fingers resting near the grip. But he wasn't planning on drawing it. Yet, he was trying to make sense of the situation, trying to figure out just who this alien princess really was. "I'm afraid that's not possible," he said carefully. "We found you on a mission! You're coming with us!" The princess studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. For a second, Jason thought she might argue, but instead she simply closed her eyes, as if contemplating something. "You think I'm some kind of prisoner?" she said softly, almost to herself. "But you're wrong! I'm no prisoner!" Jason's mind raced. "Then what are you? What do you want?" For the first time, a hint of a smile tugged at the corner of her lips.
"What I want isn't the question," she replied. "What I need is your cooperation." Jason's patience was wearing thin.
Cooperation? With what? The princess met his gaze once more, her eyes flashing with a kind of ancient knowledge. "You don't understand the artifact you retrieved." "It's not just a piece of technology. It's part of something far more important. A key to a war you've only just begun to see." A key to a war? This wasn't just about some relic. It was bigger than that. Much bigger. "What kind of war?" Riley's voice came from the doorway. She had been listening in, her curiosity evident in her expression. The princess's eyes shifted to her, and there was a long pause. "The kind that could tear the galaxy apart," she answered, quietly. Jason and Riley exchanged a glance. This was no longer just a simple mission. The stakes had just escalated beyond anything they could have imagined.
The princess's name, as it turned out, was Jara.
She was the youngest daughter of the Zelnari Empire's ruling family, a bloodline steeped in both power and mystery. Her people were ancient, their technology far beyond what humans could comprehend. She had been sent on a diplomatic mission, but things had gone wrong. She had been ambushed by rogue elements within her own empire, factions vying for control, and she had barely escaped with her life.
"I didn't ask for this," Zyra said quietly, her eyes distant as she spoke about her past.
"I didn't choose to be part of this Game of Thrones. But now that you've brought me here, it seems I have no choice but to make use of you." Jason wasn't sure if he liked the idea of being used. He was a soldier, not a pawn in someone else's political game. But he understood the magnitude of what she was saying. Her people weren't like any other alien race they had encountered. They were powerful, ruthless, and had been playing their own game for centuries. The artifact they had retrieved was a key to something more, a symbol of power, control, and war.
"I'm not your enemy," Zyra continued. "But if we don't work together, the galaxy will burn." Jason leaned forward, his mind racing as he processed her words.
What did she mean by burn? What was the artifact really for? And why had she been so calm in the face of what could have been a deadly situation? "Why should we trust you?" Riley asked, her voice laced with skepticism. Zyra turned to her, a small smile playing on her lips. "Because you have no choice. I am your only hope." Jason felt the weight of her words settle over him. The fate of the galaxy, of millions of lives rested on their shoulders. They were no longer just soldiers. They were caught in the middle of something far greater than themselves. Zyra wasn't just any alien princess. She was a key player in a conflict that spanned across the stars, a war that could shatter everything Jason had known. He had to decide what he would do with that knowledge. He had to decide if he would stand by and watch the galaxy burn, or if he would fight to stop it. The journey ahead was going to be more dangerous than he could imagine. But one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be simple again. The stars outside the Sparrowhawk's windows seemed distant, far away, as if their glow was fading with each passing second. Jason Cross couldn't shake the feeling that the universe was pulling them into something much darker than he had ever imagined. The ship hummed quietly as it continued its journey deeper into the unknown, carrying with it a secret more powerful than any artifact they had retrieved. A secret that was now in the hands of a princess, Zyra, the alien royal who had quickly proven herself to be much more than just a helpless prisoner. Jason couldn't stop thinking about her words. The key. The war. The galaxy would burn. It wasn't just an empty threat. It was a warning. Zyra had told them that the artifact they had brought back was more than just a piece of alien technology. It was part of a larger puzzle, a symbol of power that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. And now they were in the middle of it. Jason and his team were no longer just soldiers on a mission. They were caught in a game that was older than the stars themselves. He leaned back in his seat, staring at the dim console in front of him. They had been traveling for days now, heading towards the nearest human-controlled space station where they could regroup and figure out their next move. The silence in the cockpit was deafening, the weight of Zyra's words hanging heavily in the air. Riley, his co-pilot, sat next to him, her eyes fixed on the screens in front of her. But Jason could tell she was thinking the same thing.
"What do you think, Sergeant?" Riley finally broke the silence, her voice quiet.
Is she telling the truth? Jason didn't answer immediately. He had spent the past few days trying to figure out if he could trust Zyra, if her intentions were as pure as she claimed. Every instinct he had told him to be cautious. Trusting an alien princess, especially one from an empire as powerful and secretive as the Zelnari, was risky at best. But there was something in her eyes, something in the way she spoke, that made Jason wonder if there was more to her story than he realized. "I don't know," Jason replied after a moment. "I don't trust her fully. Not yet. But I don't think she's lying about the artifact. And I don't think she's the enemy." Riley looked at him. "But how do we know for sure?"
If she's right about the war, then we're in a lot deeper than we thought. We didn't sign up for this.
"I know," Jason said, "but we don't have a choice now."
"We're involved, whether we like it or not." Riley turned back to the controls, her expression thoughtful. Jason couldn't help but feel a surge of guilt. She was right. They hadn't signed up for this. All they had wanted was a simple mission, a reward for their service. But now they were carrying a living symbol of an empire on the brink of civil war, and the galaxy itself was at stake. Meanwhile, in the medical bay, Zyra sat up on her cot, her eyes closed as if in deep thought. The princess had been quiet since she had awakened, giving only brief responses to their questions. But Jason could sense the weight of her thoughts. She was calculating something, making plans, or perhaps already forming an alliance that she didn't share with them. Jason had to admit, he didn't fully understand her motivations yet. She was smart, too smart for him to predict her every move. Riley stood up from the cockpit and made her way to the medical bay. Jason watched her go, his mind still swirling with questions. When he heard the sound of footsteps approaching, he reluctantly stood up and followed her. Inside, Zyra looked up at them as they entered, her gaze steady and unblinking. "You look troubled, Sergeant," she said, her voice smooth, almost melodic. "You're wondering what's going to happen next." Jason didn't respond immediately, unsure how much of her mind he was ready to uncover. "You're not wrong," he finally said.
I'm wondering exactly that. What happens next? Zyra shifted on her cot, the soft rustle of her robes the only sound in the room.
What happens next, she said slowly, depends on you. Jason frowned.
"On me?"
On whether you're willing to trust me, whether you're willing to believe that I'm not the enemy. Jason studied her face, trying to read her expression.
She didn't seem like a threat, but how could he be sure? They didn't know enough about her or her people. The Zelnari Empire was a force to be reckoned with, a civilization of unimaginable power. If Zyra's claims were true, then they were in the middle of a galactic war that would soon engulf everything. "What do you want us to do?" Jason asked, his voice firm.
"I want you to help me stop it," Zyra replied, her eyes glowing faintly.
I want you to help me stop the war before it destroys everything.
Jason could feel the weight of her words sink in. The war she was talking about wasn't some distant conflict. It wasn't just about political power or territorial control. It was about the future of the galaxy itself. The stakes were higher than anything he had ever imagined.
And how exactly are we supposed to do that? Riley asked, her tone skeptical.
You're not getting us much to work with here. Zyra didn't flinch. The artifact you retrieved is a key.
It's part of an ancient device, one that has the power to reshape the entire galaxy. But the device is incomplete. It requires more pieces, scattered across different systems. If the wrong hands get hold of it, it will be used as a weapon. If it falls into the hands of my enemies, they will use it to destroy everything you hold dear. Jason and Riley exchanged a look.
So we're supposed to find these other pieces and stop the war?
Jason asked. Zyra nodded.
That's right. But it's not going to be easy.
My enemies are already hunting for the pieces, and they won't stop until they have them.
Jason took a deep breath. How do we know you're telling the truth?
Zyra's gaze softened. You don't, but you have no choice but to trust me. If you don't, you'll be fighting on the wrong side of this war. And I promise you, you won't survive. There was an edge to her voice that Jason couldn't ignore. He could feel the urgency in her words, the weight of her responsibility. It wasn't just her life that was on the line. It was the fate of the galaxy itself. Riley looked at Jason, her expression torn. She was still wary, still skeptical. But even she couldn't deny the gravity of the situation. What do you think, Sergeant? She asked quietly.
Jason hesitated. His mind was racing, trying to process everything he had just learned.
The princess's story, if true, would change everything. But it also meant stepping into a world of political intrigue and danger. Things Jason had never signed up for. But then he thought about the lives at stake, the lives of his crew, his people, the colonies he had sworn to protect. If what Zyra said was true, they were facing a war that would make everything they had fought for meaningless. I think, Jason said slowly, we're in this whether we like it or not. And I think we're going to need each other if we're going to survive.
Zyra's lips curved into a faint smile.
Good, she said, her tone almost approving. Then let's get started. Jason knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and the war Zyra had spoken of was just beginning to unfold. They had no idea what dangers lay ahead, but one thing was clear. There was no turning back now. The fate of everything he had ever known was in his hands, and the only thing he could do was move forward. The journey ahead would be treacherous, but Jason had made his decision. He would fight for his people, for his crew, and for the galaxy that was on the brink of destruction. The Sparrowhawk glided silently through the endless void of space, its engines humming steadily as it made its way toward an unknown destination. Jason Cross stood at the front of the cockpit, staring out at the stars, deep in thought. The weight of the mission, the responsibility, had settled on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. He had thought this mission would be simple, but nothing had gone as planned. They were no longer just soldiers carrying out a mission for the Coalition. They were now players in a larger game, one that spanned the stars and threatened to destroy everything they knew. Zura, the alien princess, had made it clear. The artifact they had recovered was just the beginning. There were more pieces scattered across the galaxy, and each one was a crucial part of an ancient device capable of altering the course of history. If the wrong hands got hold of it, the galaxy would be plunged into chaos. Jason and his team had no choice but to keep moving forward. There was no turning back now. Riley entered the cockpit, breaking Jason's train of thought. "We're approaching the first target," she said, her voice calm but laced with tension. "We've got the coordinates. It's a small colony on the edge of Coalition space." Jason nodded without saying anything, his mind already racing with the implications. This was it.
The first piece of the puzzle. If they didn't find it, someone else would.
And if that someone was Zyra's enemies, the consequences would be catastrophic. He turned to her, standing silently in the doorway of the cockpit, watching them. She had been quiet since their conversation in the medical bay. Jason still didn't know how to fully trust her, but they needed her. Her knowledge, her insight, was the only thing that could guide them through the chaos they were about to face.
"We're almost there," Riley said, breaking the silence. "Are you ready?" Zyra didn't respond immediately.
Her gaze was fixed on the view outside the cockpit, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but full of determination. "I'm ready," she said. "We don't have time to waste." Jason couldn't help but admire her resolve. She wasn't like any other alien he had encountered. There was a strength in her, a quiet power that seemed to command respect. And yet she carried with her a heavy burden, one that Jason didn't fully understand. "Let's get to work," Jason said, clapping Riley on the shoulder as he walked toward the rear of the ship. They had no time for hesitation, no room for mistakes. The galaxy was depending on them. Whether they liked it or not, the small colony was exactly as it had been described. Isolated, with only a few hundred inhabitants. It was a mining outpost, primarily used for extracting resources from the nearby asteroid belt. The colony's population was a mix of miners, engineers, and researchers, none of whom were expecting a visit from a Coalition military ship. But Jason's team wasn't here to announce their presence. They were here for the piece of the device. The first piece. The Sparrowhawk landed quietly on the outskirts of the colony, just beyond the reach of the colony's patrols. Jason and Riley, along with a few members of the crew, disembarked and made their way toward the colony's central hub, the location where the piece was supposedly hidden. Zyra stayed behind on the ship, monitoring the situation. Her presence would only draw unwanted attention. As much as Jason hated leaving her behind, it was safer that way. They couldn't afford to have anyone find out who she really was, not yet. The colony was eerily quiet as they moved through the narrow streets. The dim lights of the few remaining buildings flickered in the distance, casting long shadows across the dusty ground. Jason's senses were on high alert. Everything about this mission felt off. The quiet was unsettling. The tension in the air was palpable. "There's something wrong here," Riley muttered, scanning the area with a practiced eye. Jason didn't respond, his hand resting on the hilt of his sidearm. He felt it too, the unease, the sense that something was waiting just around the corner. But they had no choice but to press forward. They reached the central hub without incident, but as they approached the entrance, a voice crackled through their comms.
Hold it right there! Jason spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. The voice came from a figure standing in the shadows, barely visible in the low light.
The figure stepped forward, revealing themselves to be a man in a coalition uniform.
Who are you?
Jason demanded, his voice cold and commanding. What are you doing here? The man raised his hands in a placating gesture. Easy there, Sergeant.
We're not your enemy. We've been waiting for you. Jason's heart skipped a beat.
Who are you? He repeated. The man lowered his hands and took a step forward.
I'm Captain Caleb Ross, Coalition Intelligence. We've been tracking the artifact as well, and now that we've found you, we need to talk.
Jason's mind raced. This wasn't part of the plan. If Coalition Intelligence was here, it meant that someone else was after the artifact too. And that could only mean trouble.
We don't have time for games, Captain, Jason said. We're here for one thing, and one thing only.
The artifact. You can either help us or stay out of our way.
Ross didn't flinch. I'm not here to get in your way, Sergeant. I'm here to help you.
Jason narrowed his eyes. What do you mean?
Ross stepped closer, his voice low. I'm not the only one tracking this. There are other factions out there, powerful ones. If you don't work with us, you're going to find yourself in the middle of something far bigger than you can handle.
Jason exchanged a glance with Riley. We're not working for anyone.
We're just doing our job.
You think this is just a job. You have no idea what you're involved in.
The artifact you found? It's not just a piece of technology.
It's a weapon, and it's part of something much larger. We need to find the rest of the pieces, and we need to do it before the wrong people get their hands on them. Jason's blood ran cold. He had suspected something like this, but hearing it confirmed sent a chill down his spine. The stakes were higher than he could have ever imagined.
We're not here to make deals, Jason said. We're here to stop a war.
Ross didn't seem surprised. He just nodded. I figured as much.
But if you want to stop the war, you're going to need help, and you're going to need to trust me.
Jason's instincts screamed at him not to trust Ross. But he didn't have many options. The game had changed. The war was already in motion, and if he didn't play his cards right, they would all be caught in the crossfire. You've got one chance to prove you're on the right side, Jason said, his voice low. But if you cross us, you'll regret it. Ross nodded.
Understood. We're all on the same side now.
The next few hours were a blur of planning, searching, and waiting. Jason's team, along with Ross and his crew, scoured the colony for the artifact. They knew it was here somewhere, hidden away in the depths of the central hub. But it wasn't just about finding it. It was about keeping it out of the wrong hands. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they found it. The piece was housed in a small, secure vault beneath the colony's main building. It wasn't much to look at, just another piece of alien technology. But Jason knew that this was no ordinary relic. This was the key to something much greater. As they prepared to leave, Ross pulled Jason aside.
There's a larger force at play here, Sergeant, he said quietly. You're not the only ones looking for these pieces.
The Zelnari have their eyes on it too, and they won't stop until they get it. Jason's fists clenched. We're not going to let that happen. I hope you're right. With the artifact secured, they returned to the Sparrow Hawk, their minds focused on the journey ahead. There was no turning back now. The war was coming, and it was up to them to stop it. As the ship lifted off, Jason looked out the window at the fading colony below. The galaxy was vast, and the battle for its future was just beginning. They had no idea what dangers awaited them. But one thing was certain. They were in this together, and together they would face whatever came next.